Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to day 3 of our Bhakti Vaibhava seminar on Srimad Bhagavatam, 5th Canto. And we are in the first chapter of the fifth Canto, which is titled The Activities of Maharaj Priyavrata. We are in the 3rd section, and today we're going to continue on from verse 26. 3rd section is, let me just check this, what's the 3rd section here? Here it is. Priyavrata agrees to do his family duties, from verse 20 to verse 29. But we are carrying on from verse 26. So first of all, our prayers. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastyachadesha Tarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Paditanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Right, so let's just get into it. Verse 26. Verse 25 listed out the 10 sons of Maharaj Priyavrata. So now verse 26 is going to elaborate about them a bit further. 3 among these 10, namely Kavi, Mahavir and Savana, lived in complete celibacy, thus trained in brahmachari life from the beginning of childhood. They were very conversant with the highest perfection, known as the Paramahansa Ashram. So, purport by Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada begins by saying that the word Urdhva Retasa is significant. It refers to one who can control sex life and not discharge semen. And actually the semen should be used to enrich the brain. So one who can control sex life completely can work wonderfully with the brain, especially in remembering things. So in the past, the students would hear Vedic instructions once and remember them verbatim without reading books, which therefore did not exist then. Books didn't, because people didn't need them. Second paragraph, another significant word here is arba bhavat, which means from very childhood. Another meaning is from being very affectionate to children. In other words, Paramahansa life is dedicated for the benefit of others. As a father sacrifices much out of affection for the son, saints sacrifice bodily comforts for the benefit of humanity. And the 3rd paragraph, as an example, it's said about the 6 Goswamis in Srinivasacharya's Shad Goswami Astakam. Because of their compassion for the poor fallen souls, the 6 Goswamis gave up their exalted positions as ministers and took vows as mendicants, thus minimizing their bodily wants as far as possible. They each accepted only a loincloth and a begging bowl. Srila Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, thus they remained in Vrindavan to execute the orders of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by compiling and publishing various Vaishnava literatures. Verse 27. Thus situated in the renounced order from the beginning of their lives, all three of them completely controlled the activities of their senses and thus became great saints. They concentrated their minds always upon the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the resting place of the totality of living entities and who is therefore celebrated as Vasudev. Lord Vasudev is the only shelter of those who are actually afraid of material existence. By constantly thinking of his lotus feet, these three sons of Maharaj Priyavrata became advanced in pure devotional service. By the prowess of their devotional service, they could directly perceive the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is situated in everyone's heart as the Supersoul. And they were able to realize that there was qualitatively no difference between themselves and him. So, purport, Prabhupada begins by saying that the Paramahansa stage is the highest level of sannyas, but there are 4 stages, which Prabhupada describes here. First is the Kutichak stage, means that the sannyasi stays outside his village in a cottage, and his necessities, especially his food, are supplied from home. Then second is the Bahudak stage. When the sannyasi advances further, he no longer takes anything from home. Rather, he collects his necessities, especially food, from many places. This is called Madhukari, which literally means the profession of the bumblebees. So as bumblebees collect honey from many flowers, a little from each, the sannyasi, the Bahudak sannyasi, begs from door to door to get some food, but not accepting very much food from any particular house, just a little bit from each house. Then the third stage, when the sannyasi is still more experienced, then the sannyasi travels all over the world to preach the glories of the Lord, and he's then known as Paravrajakacharya, third stage. And finally, the fourth stage is Paramahansa, when the sannyasi finishes his preaching work and sits down in one place just to advance his spiritual life. An actual Paramahansa is one who completely controls his senses and engages in the unalloyed service of the Lord. So, as described here, all these 3 sons of Priyavrata were Paramahansas from the beginning, and therefore their senses couldn't disturb them because they're all engaged in devotional service. So therefore they're described here as Upasama Shila. Upasama means completely subdued. Prabhupada says because they completely subdued their senses, they're understood to have been great sages and saints. Second paragraph. So after subduing their senses, the 3 brothers concentrated their minds on Krishna. And even as we read, particularly the form of Vasudeva, because Vasudeva means the Lord, who is the reservoir of all living entities. Then, when the manifestation material world is wound up, they all enter the body of Garbhodakshai Vishnu, and then Garbhodakshai Vishnu merges in the body of Mahavishnu. So both Garbhodakshai Vishnu and Mahavishnu are what is called Vasudeva Tattvas. So the 3 brothers concentrated their minds on the lotus feet of Lord Vasudeva. So in this way they understood the Super Soul is the Lord and could recognize their oneness with him. As Prabhupada says, the complete description of this realization is that simply by discharging the unalloyed form of devotional service, one can realize his self completely. So the verse mentions Parama Bhakti Yoga, which means that the living entity by devotional service has no interest other than service to the Lord. This is described in Bhagavad Gita chapter 7, verse 19, which we've referred to many times in the previous cantos. So by Parama Bhakti Yoga, elevating oneself to loving service, one can automatically be freed from the bodily concept and see the Lord face to face. And third paragraph, Prabhupada quotes famous verse from Brahma Samhita, verse 38, Premanjana Charita Bhakti Valochanena, Santasadaiva Hridayeshu Valokayanti, Yam Shama Sundaram Achincha Gunaswarupam, Govindam Adipurusham, Tamaham Bhajami, which means an advanced devotee who is known as a sat or saint can always see within his heart the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face. Krishna, Shamsunda, expands himself by his plenary portion, and thus a devotee can always see him within his heart. Verse 28. In his other wife, Maharaj Priyavrata begot 3 sons, named Uttama, Tamasa, and Raivata. All of them later took charge of Manvantara millenniums. There's just a short purport, actually, which talks about the durations of different manus, of the manus. So, interesting point. Almost all the manus were from the family of Maharaj Priyavrata. And 3 of them particularly were the ones who are mentioned in this verse. So verse 29, after Kavi, Mahavir and Savana were completely trained in the Paramahansa stage of life, Maharaj Priyavrata ruled the universe for 11 arbudas of years. Whenever he was determined to fix his arrow upon his bowstring with his 2 powerful arms, all opponents of the regulative principles of religious life would flee from his presence in fear of the unparalleled prowess he displayed in ruling the universe. He greatly loved his wife Barhishmati, and with the increase of days their exchange of nuptial love also increased. By her feminine behavior, as she dressed herself, walked, got up, smiled, laughed, and glanced about, Queen Barhishmati increased his energy. Thus, although he was a great soul, he appeared lost in the feminine conduct of his wife. He behaved with her just like an ordinary man, but actually he was a great soul. So purport, Prabhupada makes the point that in this verse the word dharma pratipaksha, which means opponents of religious principles, refers not to a particular faith, but to varnashram. And Prabhupada explains a little further. Varnashram needs to be followed for proper social order and spiritual progress. So basically, means those who wouldn't follow varnashram properly, then he got on their cases. So the verse seems to say that Priyavrata applied this so strictly that anyone neglecting it would flee from his presence. He would warn them by fighting or some light punishment. Yes, this is if they wouldn't follow varnashram properly. So he wouldn't have to fight simply because of his determination they didn't dare to disobey the rules of varnashram. So it's said that if society doesn't follow varnashram, it's no better than a society of cats and dogs. And Prabhupada says, Maharaj Priyavrata therefore strictly maintained varnashram dharma by his extraordinary, unparalleled prowess. And second paragraph, to maintain such strict vigilance, one needs the encouragement of his wife. Brahmacharis and sannyasis, of course, don't. But for kshatriyas and grihastas, they need the encouragement of their wives. Prabhupada explains that kshatriya grihastas cannot properly do their duties without the association of their wives. So Lord Chaitanya said, Grihastha must live with his wife. Kshatriyas could even have many wives to encourage them in their governmental duties. So the association of a good wife is necessary in a life of karma and political affairs. So Priyavrata took advantage of Barhishmati, who was expert in pleasing him. She would dress nicely, smile, exhibit feminine bodily features, and in these ways keep him encouraged. So Prabhupada makes the point that in this verse, it's interesting, the word Eva is used twice to indicate Priyavrata as being henpecked. He seemed to have lost his sense of human responsibility, but actually he was fully conscious of being a spirit soul, although he seemed like an acquiescent karmi husband. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, Maharaj Priyavrata then ruled the universe for 11 arbudas of years. One arbuda consists of 100 million years, and Maharaj Priyavrata ruled the universe for 11 such arbudas. So we move on to the fourth section, which we've titled, Priyavrata divides Bhumandala into 7 islands. Now, I'll read just the verses of this fourth section. Verse 30. While so excellently ruling the universe, King Priyavrata once became dissatisfied with the circumambulation of the most powerful sun god. Encircling Sumeru hill on his chariot, the sun god illuminates all the surrounding planetary systems. However, when the sun is on the northern side of the hill, the south receives less light, and when the sun is in the south, the north receives less. King Priyavrata disliked this situation and therefore decided to make daylight in the part of the universe where there was night. He followed the orbit of the sun god on a brilliant chariot and thus fulfilled his desire. He could perform such wonderful activities because of the power he had achieved by worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Verse 31. When Priyavrata drove his chariot behind the sun, the rims of his chariot wheels created impressions that later became 7 oceans, dividing the planetary system known as Bhumandala into 7 islands. Verse 32. The names of the islands are Jambu, Plaksha, Shalmali, Kusha, Kroncha, Shaka, and Pushkara. Each island is twice as large as the one preceding it, and each is surrounded by a liquid substance, beyond which is the next island. Verse 33. The 7 oceans respectively contain salt water, sugarcane juice, liquor, clarified butter, milk, emulsified yogurt, and sweet drinking water. All the islands are completely surrounded by these oceans, and each ocean is equal in breadth to the island it surrounds. Maharaj Priyavrata, the husband of Queen Barhishmati, gave sovereignty over these islands to his respective sons, namely Agnidra, Idmajiva, Yagyabahu, Hiranyareta, Grita Prishta, Medhatiti, and Vitihotra. Thus, they all became kings by the order of their father. Right, so now let's go back and read the verses again with their purports. While so excellently ruling the universe, King Priyavrata once became dissatisfied with the circumambulation of the most powerful sun god. Encircling Sumeru hill on his chariot, the sun god illuminates all the surrounding planetary systems. However, when the sun is on the northern side of the hill, the south receives less light, and when the sun is in the south, the north receives less. King Priyavrata disliked the situation and therefore decided to make daylight in the part of the universe where there was night. He followed the orbit of the sun god on a brilliant chariot and thus fulfilled his desire. He could perform such wonderful activities because of the power he had achieved by worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Right, so let's look at the purport by Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada says there's a Bengali saying which says that someone, a powerful person, they're so powerful they can make night day and day night. So this saying has arisen because of Priyavrata. He became so powerful by worshipping the Supreme Lord. So Lord Krishna's Yogeshwara, wherever he is, there'll be victory, fortune, etc. And so the point is, devotional service is so powerful. When a devotee achieves what he wants, it's not by his mystic power, but by the grace of the mystic power of the Lord. So therefore Prabhupada says, by his grace, the grace of the Lord, a devotee can accomplish wonderful things unimaginable even to the most powerful scientist. Second paragraph. From the description of this verse, it seems that the sun moves. Of course, modern astronomers and such people say the sun is fixed and everything revolves around it. But this verse says it is not fixed, rather it's rotating in a prescribed orbit. Prabhupada refers to Brahma Samhita verse 52, which says the sun is rotating in its fixed orbit in accordance with the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Prabhupada refers to Jyotir Veda, the science of Vedic astronomy, which says that the sun moves 6 months on the northern side of Mount Sumeru and 6 months on the southern side of Mount Sumeru. And of course we have experience here that when it's summer in the north, in the south, the southern hemisphere, it's winter. So Prabhupada says, modern materialistic scientists sometimes present themselves as knowing all the ingredients of the sun, yet they're unable to offer a second sun like Maharaj Priyavrata's. So third paragraph. Although Priyavrata made a powerful chariot as brilliant as the sun, he didn't want to compete with the sun god. because a Vaishnav never wants to supersede another Vaishnav. He just wanted to give benefit on the material level. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, in the months of April and May, the rays of Priyavrata's sun were as pleasing as the rays of the moon. In October and November, the morning and evening give more warmth than the sunshine. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, in short, Maharaj Priyavrata was extremely powerful, and his actions extended his power in all directions. Verse 31, when Priyavrata drove his chariot behind the sun, the rims of his chariot wheels created impressions that later became 7 oceans, dividing the planetary system known as Bhumandala into 7 islands. So let's look at the purport. Prabhupada says, sometimes planets are called islands. Of course, we have experience of islands in the ocean, and similarly planets, the planets divided in 14 lokas, are islands in the ocean of space. So as Priyavrata drove his chariot behind the sun, he created 7 types of oceans and planetary systems, together known as Bhumandala or Bhuloka. And we know we chant in Gayatri, those of us who are second initiated, we chant Om Bhurбhuva Swatat Savitur Varenyam. So then above Bhuloka is Bhuvarloka, and above that is Swargaloka, the heavenly planetary system. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, all these planetary systems are controlled by Savita, the sun god. By chanting the Gayatri mantra just after rising early in the morning, one worships the sun god. Verse 32, the names of the islands are Jambu, Plaksha, Shalmali, Kusha, Kroncha, Shaka, and Pushkara. Each island is twice as large as the one preceding it, and each is surrounded by a liquid substance, beyond which is the next island. So there's just extremely short paragraph. Purport. The ocean in each planetary system has a different type of liquid. How they're situated is explained in the next verse. Verse 33. The 7 oceans respectively contain salt water, sugarcane juice, liquor, clarified butter, milk, emulsified yogurt, and sweet drinking water. All the islands are completely surrounded by these oceans, and each ocean is equal in breadth to the island it surrounds. Maharaj Priyavrata, the husband of Queen Barhishmati, gave sovereignty over these islands to his respective sons, namely Agnidra, Idmajiva, Yagyabahu, Hiranyareta, Grita Prishta, Medhatiti, and Vitihotra. Thus they all became kings by the order of their father. Yes, and there's another short paragraph of purport here. All the Dweepas, islands, are surrounded by different types of oceans. And it's said here that the breadth of each ocean is the same as that of the island it surrounds. That the length of the oceans cannot equal the length of the islands. And Prabhupada refers to Veera Raghava Acharya. He says the breadth of the first island is 100,000 yojanas, yojana being 8 miles. So the breadth of the first island is 800,000 miles. And the water surrounding it must have the same breadth, but the length is different. Okay, devotees, now we go on to section 5, which is just one verse, verse 34, and it's titled, He means Priyavrata, he gives his daughter to Shukracharya. And the verse, it's just the verse itself. King Priyavrata then gave his daughter, Urajasvati, in marriage to Shukracharya, who begot in her a daughter named Devayani. So that's the end of the 5th section, just the one verse. And now section 6, which is the last section. Priyavrata prepares to leave home from verse 35 to verse 41. Let us read through the verses first of all. My dear king, a devotee who has taken shelter of the dust from the lotus feet of the Lord can transcend the influence of the 6 material waves, namely hunger, thirst, lamentation, illusion, old age, and death, and he can conquer the mind and 5 senses. However, this is not very wonderful for a pure devotee of the Lord, because even a person beyond the jurisdiction of the 4 castes, in other words, an untouchable, is immediately relieved of bondage to material existence if he utters the holy name of the Lord even once. Verse 36. While enjoying his material opulences with full strength and influence, Maharaj Priyavrata once began to consider that although he had fully surrendered to the great Saint Narada and was actually on the path of Krishna consciousness, he had somehow become again entangled in material activities. Thus his mind now became restless, and he began to speak in a spirit of renunciation. Verse 37, the king thus began criticizing himself. Alas, how condemned I have become because of my sense gratification. I have now fallen into material enjoyment, which is exactly like a covered well. I have had enough. I'm not going to enjoy any more. Just see how I've become like a dancing monkey in the hands of my wife. Because of this, I am condemned. So verse 38, by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Maharaj Priyavrata reawakened to his senses. He divided all his earthly possessions among his obedient sons. He gave up everything, including his wife, with whom he had enjoyed so much sense gratification, and his great and opulent kingdom. And he completely renounced all attachment. His heart, having been cleansed, became a place of pastimes for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus he was able to return to the path of Krishna consciousness, spiritual life, and resume the position he had attained by the grace of the great Saint Narada. Verse 39. There are many famous verses regarding Maharaj Priyavrata's activities. For example, no one but the Supreme Personality of Godhead could do what Maharaj Priyavrata has done. Maharaj Priyavrata dissipated the darkness of night, and with the rims of his great chariot, he excavated 7 oceans. 40. To stop the quarreling among different peoples, Maharaj Priyavrata marked boundaries at rivers and at the edges of mountains and forests, so that no one would trespass upon another's property. And verse 41, as a great follower and devotee of the sage Narada, Maharaj Priyavrata considered hellish the opulences he had achieved by dint of fruitive activities and mystic power, whether in the lower or heavenly planetary systems or in human society. Right, so back we go to read the verses again with their purports. So it's section 6, Priyavrata prepares to leave home, from verse 35 to verse 41. Verse 35, my dear king, a devotee who has taken shelter of the dust from the lotus feet of the Lord can transcend the influence of the 6 material waves, namely hunger, thirst, lamentation, illusion, old age, and death. And he can conquer the mind and 5 senses. However, this is not very wonderful for a pure devotee of the Lord, because even a person beyond the jurisdiction of the 4 castes, in other words, an untouchable, is immediately relieved of bondage to material existence if he utters the holy name of the Lord, even once. So, purport by Srila Prabhupada. First paragraph. So, Shukadeva Goswami is speaking to Maharaj Parikshit about Priyavrata's activities. Shukadeva is feeling Maharaj Parikshit may have doubts about these amazing things. So Shukadeva is reassuring him, don't be doubtful. Anything's possible for a devotee by the grace of the Lord. So the Lord is known as a Rukrama because he occupied the 3 worlds with 3 steps, as just like Vamana, or as Vamana he did that. So he covered the whole world with 2 steps, and with the 3rd stepped on Bali's head. So second paragraph, Prabhupada quotes a verse from Jayadev Goswami's Dasavatar Stotra. We, of course, after Arati, we sing one verse in regards to Lord Nrsingadev, Tavakara Kamalavare, Nakama Bhuta Shringam. This is now a verse to Lord Vamana. All glories to Lord Keshava, who assumed the form of a dwarf. O Lord of the universe, who take away everything inauspicious for the devotees. O wonderful Vamana Dev, you tricked the great demon Bali Maharaj by your steps. The water that touched the nails of your lotus feet when you pierced through the covering of the universe purifies all living entities in the form of the river Ganges. So, 3rd paragraph. The Lord's all-powerful, so he can do anything superhuman. Similarly, the devotee can also do things unimaginable for the common man, but this is by the Lord's grace. So Lord Chaitanya teaches us to take shelter of the Lord's lotus feet. Prabhupada refers to Shikshastakam verse 5. O son of Nanda Maharaj, I am your eternal servant. Yet somehow or other I've fallen into the ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. So Lord Chaitanya is saying here, he wants to come in touch with the dust of the Lord's lotus feet, because then all success will be there. So 4th paragraph. Because of the material body, the conditioned souls, they're always disturbed by 6 waves. Hunger, thirst, lamentation, illusion, invalidity, and death. So then there's another 6 waves, which are the mind and the 5 sense organs. So what to speak of a sanctified devotee, even a Chandala, is immediately freed from material bondage if he chants the holy name of the Lord, even once. Sometimes caste Brahmins say one has to change body to be accepted as a Brahmin. And if you don't change your body, you can't be accepted as a real Brahmin, since the present body is obtained as a result of past actions, which were not on the level of Brahminical activities. Otherwise you would have been born as a Brahmin. So they say that one who's in the past acted as a Brahmin then takes birth in the next life in a Brahmin family. So they say that without such a Brahminical body you can't be accepted as a Brahmin. But here it says, even a Chandala is freed by chanting the holy names of the Lord just once. That's amazing, isn't it? That's really good. So being freed means immediately changes body. So 5th paragraph, this is really a major purport. Sanatana Goswami confirms this by saying that when a person, even though a Chandala, is initiated by a pure devotee into chanting the holy name of the Lord, his body changes as he follows the instructions of the spiritual master. And although you can't see him change the body, because an authority is saying it, we must accept that actually is happening. So the verse clearly says he gives up his bondage, and that bondage is represented by the body. So although we may not see the gross body change, chanting the holy name changes the subtle body. And so the living entity is freed from bondage, because changes of the gross body are effected by the subtle body. They're caused. Changes of the gross body are caused by the subtle body. So Prabhupada says, after the gross body is finished, the subtle body takes the living entity to the next gross body. In the subtle body, of course, the mind is predominant. So if the mind is absorbed in Krishna, it's to be understood that the person has already changed the present body and become purified. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, therefore it is irrefutable that a Chandala, or any fallen or low-born person, can become a Brahmin simply by the method of bona fide initiation. Verse 36. While enjoying his material opulences with full strength and influence, Maharaj Priyavrata once began to consider that although he had fully surrendered to the great Saint Narada and was actually on the path of Krishna consciousness, he had somehow become again entangled in material activities. Thus his mind now became restless, and he began to speak in a spirit of renunciation. Okay, so purport. Prabhupada refers to Srimad Bhagavatam 1.5.17. I'll read the translation of the verse. One who has forsaken his material occupations to engage in the devotional service of the Lord may sometimes fall down while in an immature stage, yet there's no danger of his being unsuccessful. On the other hand, a non-devotee, though fully engaged in occupational duties, does not gain anything. So if somehow we get the shelter of a great devotee, but then on the basis of sentiment, but then we fall down because of immaturity, one has not actually really become fallen, because the Krishna conscious activities he's done, they're a permanent asset. So the progress, such a person's progress, may be checked for some time, but they will again manifest. So although Priyavrata was serving under Narada Muni for going back to Godhead, but he went back to material activities, in due course as Krishna consciousness, would be reawakened by the grace of his spiritual master, Narada Muni. So, second paragraph, Prabhupada refers to chapter Bhagavad Gita 6.41, that one who falls down from Bhakti Yoga is offered an opulent position in the next life, and after enjoying that opulence, he's given a chance to take birth in a very noble or Brahminical family or rich family, so he can revive his Krishna consciousness. So actually it happened with Priyavrata, so he's a glorious example of this truth. So in due course he didn't want the material opulence, wife, etc. He wanted to renounce them. And Prabhupada says, therefore, after having described the material opulences of Maharaj Priyavrata, Shukadev Goswami in this verse describes his tendency for renunciation. Third paragraph, Prabhupada begins the paragraph by saying, the words Devarshi Charana Nushayana indicate that Maharaj Priyavrata, having fully surrendered to the great sage Devarshi Narada, was strictly following all the devotional processes and regulative principles under his direction. So regarding strict following of the regulative principles, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that by immediately offering obeisances, dandavat, to the spiritual master and strictly following his directions, the student becomes advanced, and Priyavrata was doing this regularly. So fourth paragraph, as long as we're in the material world, we're under the modes. It's not that Priyavrata was free from material influence because of his opulence. In the material world, both the rich and the poor are under the modes, as both wealth and poverty are creations of material nature. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by quoting or referring to Bhagavad Gita 3.27, according to the modes of material nature we acquire, the material nature gives us facility for material enjoyment. Verse 37. The king thus began criticizing himself. Alas, how condemned I've become because of my sense gratification. I've now fallen into material enjoyment, which is exactly like a covered well. I've had enough. I'm not going to enjoy any more. Just see how I've become like a dancing monkey in the hands of my wife. Because of this, I'm condemned. So Prabhupada makes the point that how condemned his advancement of material knowledge can be understood from Priyavrata's behavior. Of course, he did wonderful things. He created another sun, which shone during the night. He created a chariot that was so great, its wheels formed vast oceans. So these acts are so great, modern scientists couldn't imagine doing them. But because he was involved in sense gratification, ruling the kingdom and following the indications of his wife, he condemned himself. So when we think of Priyavrata's example, we understand how degraded modern civilization is. They make wonderful things, but nothing compares with what Priyavrata did. So if Priyavrata can condemn himself, how condemned are we with our so-called material advanced civilization? So such advancement has nothing to do with the fundamental problems of the living entity in the material world. But modern people don't understand that. So from the spiritual point of view, having a beautiful wife, a kingdom, wonderful material activities, these are all impediments. Priyavrata had served Narada Muni very nicely. So Prabhupada says, therefore, even though he had accepted material opulences, he could not be deviated from his own task. he again became Krishna conscious. So next paragraph, Prabhupada quotes Bhagavad Gita chapter 2 verse 40. Renunciation like Priyavrata's is only possible by the grace of the Lord. Generally, when people are materially advantaged like him, they become entangled. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, but Priyavrata, due to his training by Narada Muni, revived his Krishna consciousness in spite of the impediments. Right, so verse 38. By the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Maharaj Priyavrata reawakened to his senses. He divided all his earthly possessions among his obedient sons. He gave up everything, including his wife, with whom he had enjoyed so much sense gratification, and his great and opulent kingdom, and he completely renounced all attachment. His heart, having been cleansed, became a place of pastimes for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus he was able to return to the path of Krishna consciousness, spiritual life, and resume the position he had attained by the grace of the great saint Narada. So the purport, Lord Chaitanya speaks in the first verse of Shikshastakam, Chaita Darpana Marjanam, Bhava Mahadavagni Nirvapanam. As soon as your heart is cleansed, the blazing fire of material existence is extinguished. So our hearts are actually meant for the pastimes of the Lord. It means we should be fully Krishna conscious, thinking of Krishna, serving him manmana bhava madbhakto. And one whose heart is not cleaned cannot think of his pastimes. But if you can place him in your heart, you become qualified to renounce material attachment. So Prabhupada makes the point, the Mayavadis try to give up the material world by saying Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya, but this theoretical knowledge will not help us. If we believe Brahman is real truth, we have to place Krishna's lotus feet in our hearts. And Maharaj Ambarish did that. Savaimana Krishna Padara Vindaya, Padara Vindayo. Then we'll get the strength to be freed from material attachment. Second paragraph, Priyavrata was able to give up all desirable things, including his wife, as if she was a dead body. So people praise a beautiful woman for her body, but when her body is dead, no one's interested. So third paragraph, Prabhupada refers to Shikshastakam verse 4. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service, birth after birth. So, for one who wants to advance spiritually, attachment to opulence and to a beautiful wife are two great impediments, and they're even more condemned than suicide. So if we want to cross beyond nescience, we have to get free from women and money. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, when Maharaj Priyavrata became completely free from these attachments, he could again peacefully follow the principles instructed by the great sage Narada. Verse 39. There are many famous verses regarding Maharaj Priyavrata's activities. For example, no one but the Supreme Personality of Godhead could do what Maharaj Priyavrata has done. Maharaj Priyavrata dissipated the darkness of night, and with the rims of his great chariot, he excavated 7 oceans. There's a short purport here. Priyavrata was so celebrated, his activities are compared to the Lord's, and sometimes a sincere devotee is called Bhagavan, like Narada, Lord Shiva, Vyasadeva, because their activities are so wonderful, they're like the Lord's. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, this designation, Bhagavan, is sometimes conferred on a pure devotee by the grace of the Lord, so that he'll be very highly esteemed. Maharaj Priyavrata was such a devotee. Verse 40. To stop the quarreling among different peoples, Maharaj Priyavrata marked boundaries at rivers and at the edges of mountains and forests, so that no one could trespass upon another's property. And the purport, Prabhupada says, this example of Priyavrata in marking off, demarcating states is still followed. So areas of land are divided up for different classes of people. It's mentioned here that Maharaj Prithu, that a black man, Naishada, was born from Prithu Maharaj's father first, then Prithu. And this Naishada race was given a place in the forest, as by nature they're thieves and rogues, so keep them separate. As animals are given places in forests, men like animals also live there. So in order to become civilized, you have to become Krishna conscious if we want to live in peace and harmony. If you remain in the bodily concept, it's not possible. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, Maharaj Priyavrata divided the surface of the globe into different islands, so that each class of men would live peacefully and not clash with the others. The modern idea of nationhood has gradually developed from the divisions made by Maharaj Priyavrata. And finally, verse 41, this is another verse. This is another verse from Shastra, as was the case with verse 39 and verse 40. So there's another verse here from Shastra about Priyavrata. As a great follower and devotee of the sage Narada, Maharaj Prithu considered hellish the opulences he had achieved by dint of fruitive activities and mystic power, whether in the lower or heavenly planetary systems or in human society. And the purport, Prabhupada begins the purport by saying, Srila Rupa Goswami has said that the position of a devotee is so super excellent that a devotee does not consider any material opulence worth having. There are different types of opulences, but a devotee knows they're all material, so he's just not interested in them. As Bhagavad Gita 2:59 says, Param drishtva nivarsate, the devotees have a higher taste through doing devotional service. So sometimes yogis and jnanis give up opulence to achieve their idea of liberation, but they frequently fall down again, as their renunciation cannot endure. So one has to have the superior taste, which you get from devotional service. Then you can give up material opulence. So Prabhupada concludes the purport and the chapter by saying, Maharaj Priyavrata had already tasted spiritual bliss, and therefore he had no interest in any of the material achievements available in the lower, higher, or middle planetary systems. So there you go, devotees. We will continue on tomorrow with the second chapter. Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.